Yama, Gamalare, Burua, Urundali, Buricha, Widayalare, Kwapangatangal. I'd like to acknowledge the original lands we're standing upon right now, acknowledge the ancestors, and my fellow black people out in the crowd. Yabul, great to see some black faces here in these forums, and the brothers up here on the stage here beside me. And to our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters, yeah, thanks for the support. This journey is also inclusive of you, because I'll just say it as it is, these aren't going away, so we've got to bring you on the journey with us. Now, yeah, treaty, you know, it's a funny little thing, this thing, you know, it's, acknowledged brother, Adrian here, for what he just spoke about. I use Uncle Kevin's Gilbert work in some of the work I do, working with my young people, that in the academy or the institutions, the education that we give sometimes our young black people is quite appalling. So I'm a real big advocate for black literature to empower our black mob, because only blackness can appropriate blackness. So it's really good that we take ownership of that and empower our youngs from the people that have come before us. So I come from a strong line of people, both men and women, that have always held it down, from being parts of the missions, coming from the missions, coming into today's context where they've always been hard workers, and even pre-colonial times, you know, mob that really did a lot of great stuff. And so it's only through their work and their advocacy and that I have a voice here today. You know, I have a lot of privileges given from them, so I'd like to acknowledge them. I'd like to acknowledge all of our strong black women that are holding down our houses, looking after our children, and you know, they really are backbone in our community. So I'd like to give a shout out to all the black sisters out there, you know, keep fighting, because you make me want to be a better man because of that, so thanks for that. Yeah, I had a few notes here that I wrote down, and I was just like, first space on the sort of notes or whatever, it was left blank, you know, because it's just, where do we start, you know, where is the beginning and where is the end? But basically we're here at this point of time, and the importance of what we call in my language, gawali, talking. Gawali yella, talking, always talking, the importance of talking. You know, we come from one of the oldest living sustainable cultures on the face of this planet. Let's get that right about now, yeah? And it's through us, you know, through oral tradition that our stories are passed down, that we came to be in this light where we are now. You know, I'll just break down who I am as a Gamalare man. Gamal, G-A-M-I-L. In my language it means no or not. Are, having. So when I talk about this, I'll just give it a bit more context. So in part of my stories, part of my burungu, my dreaming, you know, dreaming is another white concept, but I'll call it what it is just for this forum now, my burungu, my place. Before we had anything, we had nothing, yeah? So when we talk about creationism and all the rest of it, a lot of these stories come before what they call that big light, you know, another Western framework, another whatever. So in that word gamal, meaning no, not, are, having, put it together, gamalare, we then had something. So from that nothingness came who I am as a gamalare man. You know, and the importance of knowing our story, knowing our songs, knowing our dances. You know, I'm very privileged to be in a position where I have these and I share these with whoever asks, but also more importantly for my children, so that way their children's children will have a better future, and possibly their children's children, you know. If we're going to go for it, let's go for it. And so that sort of brings us here to this yarn with treaty. You know, me personally, I don't even know whether that's the right thing. Like, in all honesty, you know. Treaty is just another buzzword. But treaty is the yarn of today, so it'll be silly of us not to engage with it. You know, looking at these photos here, when I come in here today, I was having a look, you know, we've got all these votes, and then we take it back to the 1930s, you know, with all these old people standing up and advocating for our rights. And so this is what we're given at this time of day, you know, to have these yarns. Like, I'll say I'll be for treaty if the simple fact is we get our land back, our country. Yeah. And I'm not meaning 20%, 30%, I mean 100% control of our traditional tribal lands. So I'll work and I'll push and I'll work and work and work and work and yarn and yarn and yarn until us, the original people of this land, have our countries back within our decision-making processes. Now, it's kind of hard when I say the processes, because I'm not of that age yet where I make decisions for my mob. You know, this is where I turn for our old people for guidance and advice. You know, my bigger brothers, my bigger sisters, and then if I get a bit challenging, I'll go ask the uncles and aunties, and then if I want to step up a little bit, I'll go and have yarn to the grandmothers and the grandfathers, and they quick, you know, they still smart, they still on it. It's just that their legs are just tired from the walk and the fight that they've been doing. Which is, like I said, which just gave me these privileges in this today's context. You know, I come not only from the Gumlaray people, I'm descendant of the Radru people, I'm descendant of the Mandangi people, and also the Wanneroo people. So pretty much the whole Middle East of this white colonial state known as New South Wales is my country, and I have a responsibility for that. So it's a pretty big country, you know, and I take that very, very personally in regards to, because this is what gives me my identity as being a black man. I'm very proud to say I'm Gumlaray. I'm proud to say I'm Wiradjuri. I'm proud to say I'm Wanneroo. I'm proud to say I'm Mandangi. Because, you know, the people that belong to these countries are beautiful, strong, giving people. And they've given me my privileges today, you know, that what I then stand up and advocate for, not only for these people, our older people that have passed before us and gone on, but also for our next generation. You know, and in today's context, you know, we're being hung up to dry. You know, like the stigma around young Indigenous men is absolutely fucking pathetic, and that's just being nice. You know, the label that they put on young Indigenous men. So that's why I stand up, you know, to change these stereotypes, these labels. You know, I confront these yarns, because through these confronting yarns, that's when we have this change. You know, it's only by confronting it that we then can change it. And so when we come back to a treaty for today, you know, like I said, for me personally, I would only want to go for a treaty and push the treaty if within that treaty we had 100% control of our tribal lands. Now, Uncle Kevin Gilbert, an extraordinary man, I've read some of his literature and it is phenomenal. You know, it's still quite relevant in today's context, and it's quite empowering stuff, you know. And back then, like when he talked about these, I've come across them once or twice. I haven't fully read them through, but I knew they existed. But also within the treaties, we've also got to acknowledge, you know, that us as the original tribes from this country and surrounding countries had pre-existing treaties. Yeah, like, and these things are quite old. And when I mean quite old, some of these are hundreds, if not thousands of years old. So the importance of us getting it right for this treaty, I feel also has to have a little bit of that part of us and who we are with these pre-existing treaties. I'll give you an example. So from me and my Gumlaray people, from my grandmother's and my grandfather's side, on my mother's side, okay, we've got this yarn that we call it the Battle on the Namoy. Okay, now this Namoy is a major river of the Gumlaray Nation. It's one of the veins and the arteries that feed our nation with the waterways. But not only within the water, you know, quenches our thirst, but also a resource for food which nourished us. So within that, this pre-existing treaty is from our mob from the north-east, with the Gumbaynggirr and the Githable, the Northern Rivers crew, up that way. Now what happened once upon a time, you know, and it was just our way. It might seem a bit barbaric what I'm about to say, but I'll say it anyways. We were stealing wives off each other. Yeah, and one day, Milroy fellas are always known. You know, everyone knows us Milroy fellas. Sorry to put us in, but you know, that's our past and we're proud of it. But it's just relevant to where we're going now, you know. They were over there stealing wives of these mob, and they didn't like it. They come over, and so we had a mad battle on the Namoy. You know, this is not 100, 200, this is a couple of 100 years old, this yarn. But out of that yarn, and out of that battle, came an understanding. Call it a pre-existing treaty, that we then had understanding for each other, we traded with each other. And out of that then came this story. Out of that then came a song. Out of that then came a dance. Part of our ways of doing as black people. So we now share that with these mob, that they have the first half, we have the second half of this pre-existing treaty. So it's important that this treaty gets put into the treaty, I would say, for my people, the Gumbaynggirr people. And then when I go out and talk to my Wanarua people, the same yarn applies. When I go and talk to my Wiradjuri people, the same yarn applies. When I go talk to my Dandendangi people, the same yarn applies. And that's just one example of these pre-existing treaties that need to be brought into this treaty. Now the processes of the treaty, I have no idea. I might have an opinion, and that's all I'm entitled to. But I do believe that it's very important that we yarn, you know, going out and informing our mob, you know, our cousins, our aunties, our uncles, our brothers, our sisters, our grandparents, our grandmothers and grandfathers, to get them on board, to give them the informed prior consent. So that way we're not misinforming our mob and we're just doing the same shit that's been going on before us. Yeah, the misinformed prior consent, which has sort of somewhat got us into this mess. The trickery, you know, it needs to stop. So I take that very seriously when I go out and yarn to my mob and inform them about these words, you know. And also these words about Aboriginal. You know, why would I call myself Aboriginal if I'm the original? Just think about that for a moment, you know, because when we step into the courts of law, the word in law and the words on the street are different yarns. So this is why sometimes we belong to the highest incarcerated rates in the world. So it's about also going back, and part of this homeland movement and the reclamation that I say, that we start calling who we are. Gumbaynggirr, Dandendangi, Wanarua, Wiradjuri. This is who I am. I'm not Aboriginal, I'm not First Nations, I'm not Indigenous. These are all white concepts. Yeah? And so the importance of that, by going back and having these yarns. Now a lot of our mob didn't know any better, but they still stood up and fought for what they had. And that was their tools at the time of the day. So I want to acknowledge that, because it's not their fault that we're in this mess, you know. If colonisation didn't happen, you know, we wouldn't be in this mess. And then the colonialism is just one of the many isms and asms that are out there that are still happening in today's world. So when I talk about colonialism, you know, it's a lot of the yarns that I also confront our non-Indigenous mob with. You know, me personally, fuck their white fragility. And I'll say it as it is. That's white privilege of being on stolen land. Yeah? So you need to acknowledge what country you stand upon. You're standing on unceded black country, and the spirit of this land is still there. We may be sitting in a building, but under the concrete is hundreds of millions of years of our blood, sweat and tears in this ground. And that's something you'll never take away. And that's the driving force that drives me to where I am today. So I'll just explain that word, colonialism. It's quite interesting actually, because it's still happening, you know. It may, when we talk about colonialism, we think of these British Empire clowns riding horses around and have this big, oh, well, they don't exist, that was back then. No, they're just wearing suits and driving flash cars and sitting up in their offices. You know, we know them as government agencies. You know, but colonialism, the policy or practice of acquiring full or partial political control of another country, occupying it with settlers, sounds a bit familiar, and exploiting it economically, all too familiar. So when we talk about this treaty, I've seen that part, Kevin talked about our sovereignty, yeah, our autonomy as black people, first and foremost. And within that, compensation. And when I mean compensation, not this thing that they're chucking around at the moment called native title. Like, what a crock of shit. Like, I mean true autonomy, true sovereignty, true control and decision-making processes of our countries. Now, the way those structures would work, I don't know. But by looking to our old people, how we have our elders' councils, have all these other systems that these pre-existing systems have, we need to have them. We still have the right to not only belong in our system, but we also have the right to benefit from the system around us. Because like I said before, these aren't going away. So we have the right to do that. And these are in the UN Nations Declaration Rights of Independence. Check it out, people, have a look. Yeah? Even pre-existing laws, when we talk about, you know, the Constitution and then the referendum, we take it back before, you know, we talk about this document, the 1875, the Pacific Islander Protection Act. You know, Section 6 of it, the amended act, talks about that only British subjects are subject to British law. I ain't a British subject. Section 7 talks about saving the rights of the tribes. Before even the 1901 document was created. And then we talk about this thing about terra nullius, you know. It's like me, if I just say I got in trouble with the law, you know. And then I went up and stood in front of the court and I said, oh, I plead self-defense, you know, blah, 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 blah. And then yet I still get found guilty. I can't then go back and change my argument. So what the hell happened to the Crown's argument when they claimed Telanares had got dismissed with grandfather Marbo up there? And yet then they claim this other thing that they took radical title of sovereignty over our lands. You know, what a crock. How's that? You know, I always someone asked me one day, Nathan, how do you hide a secret? And I was like, oh, yeah. And they just said, in full view. So no longer becomes a secret, you live it, you become a part of it. So it was that little bit of revealing, you know, and through all these old people, they've just chipped away, and we're standing there about to kick a goal, and guess what happens? They move the goalpost on us. You know, and then this is why it's always about having these informed consents, these decisions. Because I really believe in our people, you know, I believe in my brothers here. I'm not saying I have the right way, but up here, we're going to have 4 different yarns on the way that we could go about this. You know? And with that, the importance too is, with Uncle Kevin Gilbert's what I believe, the compensation. Now, I'll just speak for one of the countries identifies as Gumalaray. Just say within that treaty, we want compensation. But also in that, I'm going to push it a bit further and say, let's put an end to all mining on this country right now. Let's put an end to coal. Yeah, I'm leading into that one. And this evil thing that they call coal seam gas, that's destroying our country. Yeah, like that great artesian basin, that precious water, the gully underneath that ground connects a whole lot of mob, you know. I've been up on my grandmother's country, up in Mandanji country, gone up towards Chinchilla, Surat, Roma, you know, that poor country. All because the politicians think they know what's right for us, but all we've got to do is look behind our shoulder and go, well, look at the past policies and procedures, and yet, are we going to trust them again? Yeah. Like, really? Like, come on, people, you know? And I heard there that this, what's her name? Barney? Burney? Linda Burney, yeah, that one. You know, come out real proud, you know, bless her. Jumping, oh yeah, Labor government, if they get in, we're going to put treaty on the yarn, on the table. And I just went, okay. And yet again, are we going to trust these guys again? Yeah. You know? So within that treaty, you know, I'm calling for that, and that's the yarn I'm having with my elders. If we're going to go up here, and because the treaty is not only that, we also have to have a treaty with our own mobs, you know, in today's context, because we have a lot of mob living off country. You know, we have a lot of intermarriages with mob that bear these bloodlines and these songlines through these children that we have, which will be part of their children's yarn. So also giving each other the rights of passages and privileges. But we also need to have these governance structures set up that who's going to hold us accountable for when we do fuck up. Yeah, but that's on us. These are yarns that we need to have. And these are confronting yarns, but we need to have it. And because it's out there and it's going to be put out there, we need to have these yarns. Yeah? Like, we talk about the justice systems. You know, are we going to still come under colonial rule and be no better than the others, or are we going to create our own systems, you know, to help what they claim to be doing, rehabilitating our mob, which we know is just a false pretense, whatever, you know. So how are we going to do that? I was over in New Zealand a couple of weeks ago in Aotearoa, and that was a pretty eye-opening experience over there, that they got this thing called the Treaty of Waitangi. You know, and these fellas are just going through settlements now, a couple of 100 years later. And they're getting payouts of 120 million, 160 million. I don't really give 20 bucks, fuck the money, I don't want the money. You know, but when I talk more exclusively to my country and the amount of minerals and then all the things that have been taken out of the ground, that's what needs to be compensated for, because it was never the government in the first place. And when they started giving out land and land titles and all these rest of the crap, it was never their right to do that in the first place. So they need to compensate for that. Yeah. And so we're talking about figures, you know, like, I don't care if we bankrupt the Crown. I really don't. You know, they forgot, we people of peace. We're a people of love. You know, we're very sharing, giving people. So when we talk about this treaty, it's very important that we get it right. Yeah, because when we talk about this treaty, this is going into an agreement with the same bastards that killed our people, that run us down, that slaughtered our old people, that murdered and raped our women, and took our roles away from us as men. Let's not get that twisted, because they're still doing it. Yeah? So when we talk about this treaty, and we go in and we're going to negotiate with these fellas, and recognise them, you know, because who's going to hold them accountable? A lot of these treaties around the world have already been broken. You know, look at our First Nation mob in Canada, poor fellas. Yeah, even close, just across here, the Tasman Sea. You know, them fellas have had a lot of their land agreements broken too. But who's made the Crown accountable? So more importantly, who's going to back this Crown up and put them in their place with this treaty? Are we going to take it to the international crime courts, the international courts of justice, and have these treaties registered there, so the way they're held accountable if they're breaking them? You know, because we can also go through the other avenue and then also push it through the crime courts against humanity. So this treaty is very, very tricky. And that's why I always say I don't have the answer, I just have an opinion. So it's with all our fellow black mob first that we have these yarns, you know, and that's why I'll always back my mob, regardless of who you are, my fellow countrymen and countrywomen, you know, keep fighting. For our non-Indigenous mob, if you ain't gonna help, get the fuck out of the way. And I mean that, because we're at this time right now. And I'm not saying there's not really good white people out there, because there are mob that get it. And I'll acknowledge you right now. Thanks. But if you ain't gonna help, I'm just gonna say, get out of the way. And that's all I've got to say. Thanks.